So welcome everybody to GeogLive 28. It's really good to see you all here today. We are doing a session today on leadership for sustainability. And we've got a range of different speakers here today, as you can see on your screen. This is the 28th of our GeogLive sessions. You can find all the rest of them on YouTube. We've got Di's not here in person. We're going to have a recording from Di that we're going to listen to in two parts. We are really warmly welcoming Alison today and Josephine, and we've got the rest of the GeogLive and the EYPPC team busying away in the background as well. So thank you very much for everybody for coming along today. We've also got Tess, who's going to speak to us shortly about the Primary Geography Journal, and I'm Anthony Barlow, and I'm a member of the EYPPC and a trustee of the GA as well. So a warm welcome to you all. So do introduce yourself in the chat, do tell us where you're from. Great thanks to Sophie, who's produced a books list on this area of sustainability and climate change. I'll flash this back up at the end, but there's a whole range of books that are on this QR code, and you may know of others. So if you do know of any resources, do share them in the chat. Do tell us what we're missing out, because I'm very aware in this particular theme today we are very partial in the number of things that we can share in the short time that we've got together. As I say, this will be on YouTube afterwards. We are on social media, on Blue Sky and on Twitter, but we'd love to connect with you after the fact if you don't know much about the Geographical Association and the sorts of things that we do as the EYPPC as well. And just a reminder that everybody's sharing with a lot of goodwill the material today, but if you do reuse this or share this elsewhere, do say where you got it from and tell people the different contributors' ideas that you're sharing. Just a reminder that there's all sorts of stuff on the GA website. Very recently has been published a high quality Geography for All research report that you might want to take a look at. Really good for getting children out and about in the autumn and whenever you choose to go out. There's no such thing as bad weather. And there's lots of Geog pods as well on various themes that we're reflecting today and many other aspects of primary geography as well. We have done a previous GeogLive 15 on climate change and sustainability you might want to take a look at with other case studies and examples that you can have a look at as well. But I'll pass straight over to Tess. We've got a very busy session today to tell you about the latest issue of Primary Geography Journal from the GA.
Hi there. Hi. Yeah, lovely to see everyone today, and yeah, terrifically excited about this edition, which is crossing into frontiers that we haven't really crossed into before, and looking at futuristic geographies, which is fascinating, and lots of interpretation as to what that means, and how we've looked at that. So we've got a number of really good cutting edge articles in there. AI, all those acronyms there, I'm sure that you're all familiar with. But we've got a really great article on how to use effectively AI around planning and that type of thing, and also virtual and augmented reality. We look at a teacher who has been talking about that and how to use those in their teaching. A really interesting spin as well seems to be sort of doing a about turn, as it were, or going back to the beginning. So thinking about how we teach in the future, but using that sort of established and traditional wisdom from indigenous knowledges. So not just looking at accepted knowledges that we have, which form much of our curriculum, but thinking as well about some of those more traditional and established ways of looking at the world and how much we have to learn from that in our modern days. So there's a really interesting article on that. We look as well at STEAM, always looking at STEAM, but thinking about how that fits in to geography, looking at those science, technology, arts, and so on, and maths, but how they all can link in with geography and developing children's understanding of the local environment. Looking too at a number of learning apps and platforms and how we might use those in our teaching in school. school. And then a really fascinating interview that we've got. You may well have heard of Sophia, the robot, who is actually a Saudi citizen. She's been made a Saudi citizen. She has talked at the United Nations, and she has done an interview with Jane Whittle, who is the editor of this edition. And it's fascinating. So it is effectively a robot's interpretation and understanding of geography and primary geography and what she thinks about it. So I absolutely commend that to your reading. It's really, really interesting. We've also got an article on looking at the outdoors and how we can make those learning connections between the indoors and the outdoors, and why that is really, really effective in helping to really incorporate the children's understanding of the outdoors and how it links in with what they're learning inside. There really should be kind of no walls, I think, effectively, and this is a really good way of moving through those walls that we have within school. An article as well on technology and oracy. Oracy, we know, is a big thing, and it doesn't necessarily mean that technology is just about screens. It's also about communication and talking and so on. And then finally, absolutely critical one article that I'm focusing on today is on digital inequality and also safety and how we keep children safe in the digital world. Some really good examples from Simon Collis there, the deputy head teacher, who's on our primary geography editorial board. So lots and lots of ideas there. There are lots of extras as well. So there are downloadable resources as well as those articles. So we absolutely commend this edition, which should be landing on members' doorsteps anytime. So please do look out for that. And there will be, it is also, of course, online on the GA. So thank you, Anthony. That's our exciting edition that we've got coming up. And also, of course, we have lots and lots of resources for today's theme on leadership for sustainability and climate change. So please do have a look at the GA resources, in particular our handbook on geography, Leading Primary Geography, which has got a lot of information about sustainability, and also a whole, the final chapter, which is dedicated to leadership, and all of those areas there around leading this important area. Everyday Guide to Primary Geography in the Know series, the Primary CPD pack, as well. We've got lots of resources there, and then finally our online teaching resources. So please do have a look, go into the GA website, lots and lots of information there. And you know, we'd also love to hear about you using those resources and also using articles and inspiration from the Primary Geography Journal. So I think from me, that's it, Anthony. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Tess. Really appreciate it. And just a kind of heads up about our conference, which comes up in April 2026. Tickets are available now. A whole range of, as you can see, headline lectures, field visits, networking, evening events, teach meets, and receptions happening there. So if you want to come along and meet with us live face to face and with other teachers from across Key Stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and beyond, do come along to Sheffield College, a new site for us for this next conference next April. So our theme today, leadership for sustainability. The challenge of climate change is formidable, but we need to offer them not just truth, but also hope. Learners need to know the truth because they can be agents of change through hands-on activity. That's what's come through the DFE in the last couple of years. That's where we are today. Quite a hopeful statement as part of their policy paper. And you will have views on that, and I hope those views will be shared today in the various case studies that we look at. And just as a bit of a preamble for a minute or two, I just want us to think about where we've come to, because if that's the state of play today, perhaps from the DFE's perspective, I was looking around at how I could kind of say, where we came to in terms of this launch of the DFE sustainability strategy. And some of you will have been alive long enough, some of you will have been aware of the different things that have impacted where we are today in terms of our global thinking and our educational thinking on this series of matters. So I use Seeds. If you've not come across Seed, a great organisation you might want to look into, Seed's timeline really about what they've done and what the world and the world of education has done to try and develop our thinking on these different themes, called various things over time: global citizenship, ESD, and so on. But it's obviously combined with lots of political action, or inaction you might argue, over time. So just worth thinking about where we've come to be, because certainly the intersection between politics and the Education Authority has come together. I mean, the QCA has produced stuff when it was in existence in 2006, which really did help me when I was a primary school teacher think about how we might put this into a big picture of sustainability and global citizenship as a cross-curricular theme. But of course then we got to 2010 and the idea of sustainability was removed and certain things were closed down. The idea of sustainable schools by 2020 was stopped. So we've had a long journey of kind of moving some steps forward, moving some steps back, and again you'll have a view on where we are today and how quick we should be moving in the future. And we've got these sustainable development goals. The very first slide that I shared had those images, had those graphics on, which are goals which some schools use and are very current in some settings and probably absent in others. And there's lots of resources we could share today. There's a great book published by Stephen and Steve, who are on the call today, alongside other materials as well that you can find out about. And I was really taken by what our friend and colleague Paul Rowins put on LinkedIn the other week about Fran Martin and her book on caring for our world, an approach to these ideas of education for sustainable development for the very youngest in our world. Because in 1999 we were saying that the school curriculum should develop an awareness, an understanding of, and a respect for environments in which the children live, and secure their commitment to sustainable development at a personal, local, national and global level. And Paula, in her post on LinkedIn, said, why is it now such a struggle to get this back on the mainstream agenda and back in the curriculum? And maybe the curriculum review that's going on at the moment will help us with that. So worth looking out for that book, available quite cheaply secondhand, I notice, at the moment online. And there's various other sources, various other people doing all sorts of things. The Chartered College have got a climate change sustainability education toolkit you might want to have a look at, with further case studies alongside the ones from today that you might want to have a look at. But today we're going to focus on three individuals. We've got Di Swift coming first of all, talking to us about this link between curriculum coherence in primary and trying to link that in with sustainability. So I'll listen to this for about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll go to our live contributions today. So I'm going to play a video of Di and me talking. There's a Q&A that I'll play right at the end, but it's the substantive content that I want to focus on first of all about what Di said. So I'm going to put my camera off and turn my mic off, but do tell me if you can't hear the sound on this recording of Di's contribution.
So it's lovely to be with you today, and I'm sorry that I can't be with you in person. So my name's Di Swift. I'm an associate lecturer at the Open University on the primary education course. But it's my real delight to share with you today a project that I was involved in when I was director of a SCIT, a school-centred teacher training programme. And this project was looking at primary geography's contribution to education for sustainability. So the project report is displayed on the screen now, and we're going to use that project report to go through a few of the key ideas. So the project was funded by BERA, the British Educational Research Association, and it was part of their work in relation to their curriculum forum. And it was a small grant of around £3,000 to look at curriculum investigation. But what that money did was buy 4 geography leaders time out of their school to come together to talk about some of these really important and gritty issues about curriculum design, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a moment, the concept of coherence, which again we'll revisit, and that all-important notion of what is the contribution of primary education to this big concept of sustainability. So within the report, which I think you've got a link to, there's a little bit of an introduction, a little bit of background about the grant. And then the report is organised into sections, so the key elements, and that's what we'll perhaps concentrate on today. And that will introduce you to the particular curriculum design intervention that we used. And then we share some of the work, some of the pupils' work, and some of our reflections on how our sequences of learning went. And when I'm talking about a sequence of learning, that was anywhere between 4 and 6 lessons, sometimes done weekly, sometimes done in a block. There were different ways of organising the sequences of learning. So I hope that the full report will be particularly useful to you. The summary is obviously a very powerful insight, and in there we share the definition of sustainability that we use. So it's perhaps a very familiar definition from the Brundtland report, dated in terms of 1987, but still we felt very powerful. And that's where sustainability is defined as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And one of the things that we found is, as a group of primary geography educators coming together, actually it was really important for us to debate that term. The term sustainability is a contested term. It is a term that can include a myriad of different perspectives. And so although, you know, all of us have got a background in teaching primary geography, not all of us have got degrees in geography, we still found that we needed to come together and debate that term. And that may be something that you will also find of value within your own schools and settings. The Brundtland report is also used by the WWF, the Worldwide Fund for Nature. And one of the key resources for the project was, in fact, the School Sustainability Guide that's published by the WWF. And if you have a look at that guide, there's a bit more of an expanded definition on page 50 of the WWF School Sustainability Guide. And that is a resource that I would heartily recommend looking at, although we used it quite cautiously, because whilst it's a resource I would recommend looking at, it's got lots of activities. And what we wanted to do in the project was think about our purposes rather than go for the activities. So we thought very carefully about our purposes before engaging in activities. And again, some of you will perhaps be familiar with a curriculum approach called Heads, Hearts, Hands. So in terms of our heads, we engaged with this concept of sustainability. In terms of our hearts, we were thinking about the moral purpose of education. And that was one of the things that we used carefully to think about the WWF resource. WWF is a campaigning organisation. What is the role of campaigning organisations in schools? So that's where we were using our hearts and thinking about the moral purpose. And then the hands, and we had to resist the hands. We had to resist going straight for the activities. So there's some wonderful activities in that WWF guide, but we didn't dive into the activities. We wanted to step back and think about curriculum design and why it was important for us as teachers to exercise agency in terms of our curriculum design. There's of course a connection between sustainability and climate change. And again, we thought a little bit about that. And another important government policy documents relate to science rather than geography. And as geographers, we found that a little bit offensive because we were really mindful that geography can make a different contribution to science. So again, it's thinking about the importance of our disciplinary lenses when thinking about what we can contribute. So having grappled a bit with sustainability, we then grappled a bit with this notion of curriculum design. And what we found ourselves differentiating between is a concept of curriculum design, curriculum making, and lesson planning. And all of them are important. So within the skit, of course, when we're working with beginning teachers, quite often they're focused on individual lessons, but those lessons sit within the curriculum that we make, and the curriculum that we make sits within our overarching design. So when we're designing the curriculum, that's when we were really thinking about the contribution of primary geography. And interestingly, when we were thinking about the contribution of primary geography, we went, of course, to the national curriculum. We went to the Ofsted research reviews. We went to the GA's resources about the role and the purpose of geography, as well as the government's materials about sustainability education. When we looked at those, neither in the national curriculum nor in the GA's own material is the concept of sustainability there as a disciplinary concept, as a key concept within geography. And again, at first, we were a bit offended by that, and we were thinking, but our project, we want a project that engages teachers and children with this concept of sustainability, thinking about meeting the needs of the future without compromising, the present. Why is sustainability not there? And we actually came across some work by Alice Maud, who talks about sustainability as being an evaluative concept rather than a disciplinary concept. And what she means by that is sustainability contains a particular view that we use to evaluate the way that we realise some of the disciplinary concepts. So that definition of sustainability, if we use it in relation to some of geography's key concepts like place or scale or location or environment, it changes the way we think about place or scale or location or environment. So what we found was by using sustainability and place, or sustainability and location, or sustainability and environment, we were then really clear, or much clearer, about geography's disciplinary contribution, and we were using sustainability as a concept to specialise and organise the way that we thought about geography's contribution. And I guess there I'm using the term concept to think about a big idea that encompasses lots of views and perspectives. So I'm using the idea of a concept to think about a range of perspectives, not to offer a single solution. And that ended up being really important to us, because in the project, as teachers, our concept of sustainability grew and developed. Our concept of curriculum design grew and developed. Our concept of coherence grew and developed. And you'll see from the evidence bit of this report that we'd also want to argue very much, and really importantly, that the pupils' perspective on sustainability grew and developed, because we used it as a big idea, this concept of meeting the needs of the present without contributing future generations to meet their needs. We use that as a big idea rather than looking for atomised facts or information that's really difficult to generate ideas from, and rather than looking at skills or activities. So big concepts help us relate the knowledge and the skills together to develop our understanding and our meaning making. And that was really important to us. And that ended up us leading a challenge to some of the government's materials, where if it focuses on a very scientific definition of sustainability, which again is still contested, but maybe that very scientific, arguably more propositional view of sustainability forgets the heart and the hands bit. It overemphasizes the heads bit. And when we're thinking about a big concept like sustainability, that holistic perspective we certainly found to be really powerful. So the other concept that I perhaps need to talk a little bit more about is this concept of coherence. And so we used an approach developed by Professor Elizabeth Rata, who works in New Zealand. She's based at the University of Auckland, and she's developed this framework called Curriculum Design Coherence. And it's based on this idea that if we organise the curriculum logically, that really helps the children to grow their knowledge, to accumulate their knowledge. And one of the things about coherence is making concepts very visible, being very conscious when we're using concepts to design and organise our curriculum. So you can't teach a concept, you can't teach necessarily sustainability, but you can give children access to the ideas associated with sustainability so that the children are developing their own schema. And to do that, we need to be really logical about the way that we organise the curriculum. So we need to name concepts in our curriculum design. And by naming those concepts, that gives us as teachers agency, because we're very deliberate, we're very intentional, we're very thoughtful about our practices. So the introduction goes through in a little bit more detail about this notion of coherence in curriculum design, some of the ideas that I've outlined about geography's contribution. And then what I've just touched on now is that relationship between teachers' curriculum design knowledge and pupil progression. So again, some of you will be familiar with this notion of horizontal and vertical progression in the curriculum, horizontal thinking within a class or a year group, a vertical between the different year groups. So again, as leaders of primary geography, how did we enable different year group teachers to engage with the concept of sustainability? How were they using that engagement in their own teaching and learning of lessons? So thinking about this coherent curriculum design, not just within a year group, but over time. And obviously with a concept such as sustainability, where geography's got a contribution to make, so as science, so as history, so as art, when we're engaging with a big idea like that, being really conscious, deliberate and intentional. And of course, that takes time, and we were very privileged in the project to be able to have that time. The way we used that time was we met together over 4 days. We knew the bid was successful a couple of years ago around this time. We then recruited schools. We spent time looking at the literature. So again, that really important of developing our own knowledge. We then looked at the CDC model itself, which again, we'll look at in a little bit more detail at the moment. We planned our work, we worked collaboratively. We then visited each other in our schools, which was just a joyful experience, and then came back together to reflect. So that's the way that we organised our time. So I'm just going to skip through to the CDC model. This is how it looks. So thinking about subject concepts and then developing a proposition, a proposal for the learning. Then linking, as I've mentioned, the propositional and the skills knowledge to develop understanding, that know-how-to knowledge, so that we can evaluate the success of our programme. So in section 3, that's where you'll find a little bit more about the CDC model that's got much wider applicability than geography and sustainability. It's a different way of thinking about curriculum design, but one that we found very powerful and very empowering. And then what we actually did, we had different year groups. So year 3, year 4, year 5, year 6, which was beautiful, but by coincidence. The year 1 teacher looked at food production. So their proposition was food production is diverse, looking at sustainability in terms of diverse environments, diverse types of food production. And the year 4 teacher looked at the locality, and interestingly, it was in Stoke-on-Trent, looking at the pottery industry, inherently unsustainable, and at the moment lots of the children were experiencing parents who are being made redundant. So there was quite a negative connotation with the pottery industry and the relationship with the environment. So this gave the teacher the opportunity to enable the children to think differently. the Year 5 teacher looked at water use, something that's been in the news again currently. And interesting, that teacher was also concerned with this concept of eco-anxiety, where children can feel very anxious about the environment, and actually a focus on sustainability education enables us to open up understanding so that children can use that understanding as a resource to sense make and meaning make. And that teacher would reflect that it did actually reduce some of the anxiety that some of the children came into the classroom with. And then the Year 6 teacher was looking at food choices. And again, one of the things we were conscious of with the project is thinking about the learning maturity of the children and their own agency. And with that concept of sustainability, what was meaningful for them in terms of the choices that were within their control, so that, again, we were making an authentic contribution. So the detail of each teacher is there, and you can see there we've got in the penultimate column where we've used key concepts from geography. So teacher 1 was looking at environment, place, space, similar for teacher 2, but the addition of human and physical resources, water use, human and physical resources, and interconnection and place. And the teacher in Year 4 looking at place, scale, diversity. So sustainability is an evaluative concept in relation to those disciplinary concepts of geography. And then I'm just going to finish off by sharing some of the evidence created from the children and the way that we evaluated the children's understanding. And the way that we worked with the children was we used mind maps. So at the beginning of the project, the children did their mind maps, and then at the end of the sequence of learning, they added to it. So this is from School 1, working with the younger children, and quite interestingly, at the beginning of the project, sustainability, I think it's something for children aged 16 plus. I think it's to suss things out. So the mind maps gave us a way into the children's prior knowledge and understanding. And then in blue, in this case around, is some of the knowledge that the children then were associating with the concept of sustainability. So again, not looking for single solutions, but looking for widening the children's view and perspectives on sustainability, looking for them to be more informed, more thoughtful, more careful with their thinking, in relation to this, how we meet our present needs without unsettling the needs of the future. And it was quite fascinating. Again, I'm perhaps going to just skip through to one of the other schools' pupils' work on sustainability. And interestingly, in this school, prior to the project, the way that they assessed the children at the end of a unit of work was that the children did a form of test, and the children had to get 7 out of 10. And if they didn't get 7 out of 10, they had to go and revisit. Interestingly, what the teacher said was by using the mind maps, they actually found that the children were connecting knowledge beyond the taught knowledge. So they were connecting their everyday experiences, they were bringing that in. They found that some of the children previously who perhaps hadn't performed well on that very reductive testing actually have got a lot of knowledge about sustainability that the teacher previously had been innocent of. And equally, the mind maps at the end enabled the teachers to see how the learning that the children had experienced in the lessons had leaked out into their everyday lives and leaked out into other subjects. And we claimed that as a very positive outcome of the project, but it also made us think very carefully about a complex concept such as sustainability and what can be a useful way of assessing the impact of our curriculum design. And actually, we need expansive means of assessing the impact of our learning, particularly in a subject like geography, where we've got a range of disciplinary concepts that we can contribute. So
So I'm going to pause it just there. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and we're going to move on to our next live speaker. I hope that was a useful introduction to Di's very comprehensive piece of work, clearly a sustained piece of work over time that maybe we could aspire to do in our classrooms and in our schools, but worth reading in terms of the reflections that you might have in terms of what you might be able to manage and the links, I think, between some of those big picture ideas about disciplinary knowledge that we are increasingly being asked to think about in our schools and in our settings. So I'm going to move straight on to our live case studies. First of all, we're going to invite Alison from Thorpe Helsley. So welcome, Alison. Thank you very much for being with us today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. So I've been invited to give a little bit of a flavour of sustainability and climate change leadership within primary school. And as Anthony said, I'm from Thorpe Helsley, which is quite a big village on the edge of Rotherham. We're quite a large primary school, about 550 pupils. And I'm the outdoor learning and also the climate change lead for the school. I'm also, we work within a trust called the NCLT, which is the New Collaborative Learning Trust, which has 3 sixth form colleges, 3 primaries and 3 secondary schools. And I'm the sustainability champion across all of those schools. So I'm coming at this partly from primary school and experience as a year 3 teacher and having worked in lots of other year groups as well, leading climate change and outdoor learning here, but also looking at sustainability and sustainable development across the trust. We have put climate change, and there's a distinction between sustainable development and climate change. We've put climate change on our QUIP last year, and it's continuing through to this year as one of our main priorities. At a trust level, we've committed to both sustainable development and climate change as one of our main priorities as well. So if you could move on to the next slide, please. I'm just going to run over what I'll cover today. I'm just going to touch very briefly on why it is, as a primary school and as a trust, we're putting those concepts so centrally to what we're doing. I want to touch on our curriculum and how we're thinking about our curriculum design and delivery. I want to talk about student action, and so beyond the curriculum, what are pupils involved in? And then lastly, looking at a few issues from school and trust leadership perspective. So if you could move on to the next slide, thank you. Okay, so the why. As I said, we've made it one of our main one of our priorities as a school. And why would we do that when there are so many other competing priorities as well? You know, we've got to deliver against our curriculum across the board, and we've very much as a trust got focus on our results, but we also very much have a focus as a school on a creative curriculum. And why would sustainability and climate change be such a key part of that? But if you can go on to the next slide, there are a multitude of reasons why, and I could pick many and talk to them for quite some time, but I've picked 3 to just very briefly focus on. Firstly, equity. As we know, climate change in particular, but also wider changes with regards to sustainability affect populations very, very differently. And it is the most vulnerable populations, the most vulnerable families, the most vulnerable children who are most significantly affected by the adverse impact. And in fact, in 2022, 13.4% of households were fuel poor and didn't have the access to being able to pay for insulation or other other issues that would affect their daily life in terms of climate change and sustainability. Well, as a trust, one of our absolute banners of focus is making a positive contribution to social mobility. And so because of that places climate change and sustainable development absolutely centre stage into what we're doing as a trust. And that's why the trust has made such a commitment. Second reason is about anxiety, and this has already been mentioned this evening. Climate change anxiety is a significant and growing issue, definitely in our colleges and in our secondary schools, but even in primary schools as well. In 2021, the Global Survey on Young People's Climate Anxiety, in the UK, only 6% of young people aged 16 to 25 said they were not worried about climate change. And if you look at the other end of that, 49% of young people that age, and I know we're talking primary, but it's filters to primary age as well, starting that young, 49% were extremely or very worried about climate change. And what we know from working at school level is that, yes, absolutely, understanding is key, knowledge is important, but also being able to take action, having agency to take action on sustainable development and climate change goals is absolutely key in addressing that anxiety, feeling like you can do something about it. The last one on there is about skills for the future, and I touch about on this particularly when we talk about student action, because partly what we're doing here is not just educating, we're also skilling up the next generation. And so to have the opportunity at primary school to be able to work on concepts of sustainable development and climate change is really key in developing those skills. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. So first off, I thought I'd just touch on our curriculum. Sorry, if you can move to the next one as well, please. So one of the things that I feel very strongly is that most primary schools are working on sustainable development and climate change a lot already. There is a lot happening in most primary schools. What may not be happening, as Di was really clearly touching on, is that we're not necessarily being as deliberate and as conscious and as intentional about that. And we're not necessarily looking at pupil progression on their knowledge of sustainable development and climate change. And so one of the things that we're involved in at trust level at the moment is looking at auditing what we're already doing and where the potential to strengthen that and to look at progression of knowledge comes in. And one of our tools for doing that is the Sustainable Development Goals. And one of our other primary schools uses the Sustainable Development Goals very, very clearly to guide their curriculum. And they actually take a different goal each term to focus that and help design their curriculum for that term across a range of different subjects. At Thorpe, we are trying to strengthen across the board, but we also really focus on themed weeks and days. And I just thought I'd give you a little bit of a flavour, just to give you some ideas for how this could be done. So last term, summer term, across the whole school, right from nursery through to year 6, we had 2 weeks of work focusing on Earthshot. So some of you will have heard of Earthshot. It's the prize, the international prize that Prince William heads up. And it's all about looking for solutions for the future. And through Earthshot, we were able at a class level to focus on particular themes within sustainable development, and then to work over those 2 weeks on looking at solutions. And obviously this is primary school, it was child-led, it was looking at ideas that might be engineering based, or it might be societal based, it might be based in politics. It was a whole range of different ideas that the children came up with. They designed solutions, and then our eco champions, our group of eco champions, judged the contributions, and they had prizes of trees to plant in the school grounds. So that's an idea for, you know, a themed event across school. We were hitting DT, we were looking at geography, we were looking at science. There was a whole range of different subjects as our focus for that work. We've also done a themed week called Nuts About Nature. And this was inspired because of the horrendous news of the decline in our biodiversity and nature within the UK. We are one of the world's most nature depleted countries. And 1 in 6 of our species are currently at risk of being lost. And we felt that children really needed to have the exposure to find out about species that come from their own country. We do a lot of looking at Brazil or looking at the DRC in Africa and looking at species there, but we wanted to focus it on British species. And we worked really hard with the children to look at both a knowledge base of the species in this country, but also to connect, so to do a lot of work outside and to connect children to those species, to their knowledge, but also to their connection to them. We worked as a whole school, and every child had an involvement in building a habitat sculpture, and we invited parents in and made it a family event. So that's a quick whistle-stop tour of what we've done in terms of some of our curriculum ideas. Core to that has been getting outside and children having that connection to their own space, their own environment, and learning about the changes over time, changes over seasons, connecting to species, and being able to explore outside their own environment. Okay, next slide, please. I'm very conscious of time. Okay, so the next thing that I just wanted to touch on was pupil action. As I said at the beginning, I think this is absolutely core to addressing anxiety, but also addressing skills and skilling up our children for their life beyond school. And there are various ways that we're doing this. Across the Trust, every school or college either has already an environment or eco group or sustainability group, or has a commitment to make that over the next few months. Here at Thorpe Hesley, we have the Eco Champions, and here are 2 of my fabulous Eco Champions. Anthony, because we're tight for time, could you play the young lady on the right-hand side, please?
I like doing Eco Champions because it feels good to know that you're helping making a difference.
Thank you. That's really key. And I think Eva speaks for the rest of the Eco Champions, is that they feel they want to do something, and they're a really committed bunch of young people. I know from experience of teaching in primary schools, whenever I talk about sustainable development or climate change, it lights up the room, because children are desperate for information, desperate to talk about it, really, really interested. And Eco Champions gives them an outlet to be able to take some action. Now, we've done all sorts of things, switch off campaigns, they do lots of litter pickings, they've developed various recycling schemes within school, they've looked at school dinners, a range of different things. The thing that's going to be transformational this year, and this is my big recommendation to everybody, is Energy Sparks. We as a trust have invested in all our schools and colleges having Energy Sparks, and it's a mere £500 a year. It's not expensive. Anthony, does that link? Fabulous. So Energy Sparks is a platform that provides half-hourly data for schools about their electricity and their gas use. And it's great because it has both a pupil dashboard and an adult dashboard. So as a school, in a minute I'm going to talk about leadership in school, about sustainability and climate change. As a school, we can be monitoring our energy use, and we can look at trends half hourly. We can look at what our holiday use is. We can look at what our overnight use is. We can run experiments like having switch off days for our whiteboards and see what that does to our energy use. But from a pupil point of view, this pupil dashboard gives them the information about what energy we're using, but it also then gives them lots of ideas for what they can do. So as a Eco Champions group this year, they're going to be using this dashboard to help design their own work. Rather than me coming and saying this is what we're going to do, they're going to be coming up with their own ideas informed by Energy Sparks. So my big recommendation to everybody is invest in Energy Sparks. I think it is phenomenal. Really, really great. Okay, I'm going to just move on to the school and the trust, to the last set of slides, and to the next slide. Thank you, Anthony. The other things that have been very useful to us from a leadership point of view on sustainable development and climate change are the following organisations. And at the end of my slides, there are some links to these organisations. So first off, Let's Go Zero have been phenomenal. They've helped us audit our carbon impact as a school. And then helped us take that and decide what our priorities were. So working with Let's Go Zero, we've developed our climate change action plan, which is now informing both what we do as a school, as adults, what our curriculum will look like, but also now what children will be working on in their own action. Secondly, National Nature Park are brilliant. I haven't talked very much about our rewilding approach and our approach to biodiversity, but it is central to what we're doing here. And National Nature Park helps you map what your biodiversity is like within your school and see changes over time. Really, really great. Thirdly, the Climate Change Ambassadors Scheme will provide you with people who are skilled on climate change to help you in your school decide a way forward. So I would really recommend going on their website and having a little look around. Our rewilding approach, we have in Rotherham something called, it used to be called Rewilding Rotherham, but it's gone bigger. It's now called Rewilding Schools, and it's an award scheme where you can commit as a school to improve the amount of wild space within your school and involve the children and your families in doing that. I heartily recommend getting involved, and if you would like to contact me and I can give you more information, you're very welcome. My contact details are at the end of this set of slides. And then Energy Sparks, if you're part of an academy, what we're doing with Energy Sparks this year, starting in a few weeks' time, is we're going to be launching a big competition across our different schools to spark that interest, to spark that action on Energy Sparks. And there will actually be a little bit of financial input into schools to recognise the winners, the people that have done the most to move forward on Energy Sparks. And then lastly, as a trust, we have been working on making a commitment to have solar at all our sites, or our 9 sites. It's very early stage, but we're working on that. So if we could have the last slide, please, Anthony. I'm very aware that I have run over a little bit. My contact details are at the bottom there. And there are links within that slide to all of the organisations and support that I've talked about. Please do contact me if you've got any questions. I'm really happy to be in touch.
Alison, thank you so much. Really helpful to hear your clear articulation of the passion that you put into this and the detail that you've put into that slideshow. So hugely impressive, and I can only think back to when I was a teacher myself and the small steps that I was making. You've made giant leaps there. You really have. So huge accolades from me. Really impressive. So thanks so much for sharing that. Do look to the chat to talk to Alison. Do look to the chat to share additional perspectives if you'd like, because we're going to move straight on to Josephine. But do carry on that conversation in the chat, because it would be really good to hear your views on what you just heard and hear your links to other resources that you might know of that connect with that. But I think, Josephine, you're back in the meeting after maybe a tech problem or two. Josephine, straight over to you if we can.
Great, thank you, Anthony, and thank you to Di and Alison. There's some great comments there, and it's just fabulous. I'm going to take a slightly more macro view, perhaps. Sometimes we do get sucked into our classroom in the minutiae of curriculum, etc. So I'm going to just step out for, which hopefully will be helpful for potentially new people entering the education sector. So yeah, one planet, one humanity, and one you. So yeah, just a few notes from a fellow human being, Josephine Dunlop. So I am an educator. My background is secondary education, biology, but I've done a bit of work in primary in certain ways. I'm also a parent to 2 little children in primary school, and a co-chair of governors as well. I've just started that role at my children's school. So hopefully that brings a slightly different perspective to Di and Alison. So could you have the next slide, please? So like Alison, I'm going to start with the why. Why is this important to do this work on sustainability? It couldn't be more important to know the why, to find that energy and those solutions as to how we do that. So yeah, if you want any tips on how to talk to other colleagues who might not know what they're doing in the sustainability field, you can look at Simon Sinek's work on persuading people on why they should do things. So let's start with the next slide. So yes, why? What's our purpose? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We've often looked at that in teacher training. I don't know if that's still something that we look at in teacher training. It certainly was when I did. So look at the foundation of those needs, the two steps right at the bottom. We have our physiological needs. Look at that. We've got nutrition, so our food, water, air, shelter. Now, what we're seeing is all of those are being impacted with climate change and biodiversity degradation. We're getting crop failures, pollution, water, air, land. So we're having serious issues with that, and that's rippling into our society and affecting stability and security. So we're seeing conflicts increasing, more polarized politics. So this is why this work is so important within the educational remit, is looking at just the basic needs of what we need as humanity. Next slide, please. I couldn't not put a picture of David Attenborough, our hero, and he puts it beautifully. I mean, we have a finite environment, the planet. Anyone who thinks that you can have infinite growth on a finite environment is either a madman or an economist. Now I will show you an economist who is not, who is on the right tracks, and we need more people like her. But yeah, no, David does say it very well. And if you need any inspiration for this important work, do watch his latest documentary, Oceans, with David Attenborough. It's absolutely fantastic, and does talk about the importance of having more marine reserves protected, and the benefits leak out into the rest of the ocean. And it's similar to what you were saying, Alison, with the sort of sustainability, or maybe it was Di, sorry, I can't remember who, but yeah, our work in schools, the positive work we do in schools will leak out into the community. So another reason to really use our opportunity, our responsibility, our privilege of working with these young people to do good. And also just comment on our economy. I mean, the structure of our economy was designed during a time when we thought the planet was infinite. So we take, make, and chuck. And when we couldn't take any more in that location, we would just move somewhere else. We are the first generation to realize that this is not sustainable. So let's have a look at the next slide, please. So Johan Rockström has done some amazing work. He's done some really cool TED Talks, as well as a documentary called Breaking Boundaries that explains this very well. So if we look at the first graph, sorry, this is the only graph I'll show. Graphs can be cool though. So we can see the Holocene period in our geological history is very stable. So we had about 10,000 years of stability where the temperature range was very stable. And that's where our civilization was developed. Some people are saying we should be saying we're in the Anthropocene, the geological area of the Anthropocene. It's not official, I don't think, as of today, but we need to move out of the Anthropocene, or at least learn how to live with our planet whilst being in the Anthropocene. So just to sort of look at the time scale, the big macro view of that. Next slide, please. There we go. A fabulous economist, Kate Raworth, who developed the donut economics model. It's just visually beautiful, saying that we need to live within the donut, the safe and just space for humanity. So we need to live below the ecological ceiling. And Johan Rockström, who I just mentioned, he talks about all those elements of the ecological ceiling, some of which, unfortunately, we're already overshooting into, which is very dangerous. And then also the inner circle, our social foundation. Has everyone got access to good education, health, food, etc.? So in our maybe thinking with our curriculums, it's thinking about those two boundaries. So in PSHE, in other, obviously geography, thinking about those two elements and how they can be weaved in to our curriculums. So yeah, Kate Raworth again has done some amazing TED Talks. So do look at that for inspiration. Next slide, please. I went to the annual Festival of Education in July and saw Mike Berners-Lee live, and he talked about his latest book, A Climate of Truth, and it was, I think, quite sobering for all of us in the audience. And he just hit it home on the macro scale, that we are accelerating into a polycrisis. So you've got that on the diagram on the left there. So we've got climate, energy, population, food, biodiversity, pollution, disease. They're all interlinked. So we talk about climate and carbon dioxide, but it's not just that. It's biodiversity. It's what food we're eating. It's how we have our energy, how we don't litter, the pollution levels. So it's a big web of things. He argues that if you look at that top with the three circles, the top in the middle diagram, right at the core of the thinking and values that are impacting our politics, media, business, technology, law, education is in there as well, which are causing the polycrisis, potentially or not part of the solution. And if you look at the diagram right at the bottom, he's saying our thinking and values really need to shift. And that goes to what was being said by Di and Alison about climate anxiety. We need to respect the environment, respect all people, and obviously respect the truth. Once we do that, we can work towards solutions. So it's nice to hear about Fran Martin's work, caring for our world. It feels like that ties in there. And also, if you haven't heard of Rachel Musson's work, Thoughtbox, they do fabulous work on this sort of area. But it's just being aware of we are part of a poly crisis, but also therefore part of a poly opportunity. We've got lots of opportunities to improve, and in education we've got a key role in being part of the solution. Next slide, please. So this is why I feel we need to really use education with a sense of purpose. And now let's go to the next slide for the how. How can we do that? Before delving into a little bit how, it is quite overwhelming, isn't it, all this climate chat? There's so much out there, which is fabulous, but can be a little bit overwhelming. Also, when you read the news, it just feels like nothing is happening. We've nearly had 30 years of COPs, and it feels like not enough has happened. It can be just so infuriating. So be aware of where you might be on this curve. Are you in denial? Are you bargaining? Are some of your students or colleagues also part of the resistance phase, perhaps, if you're struggling to get enough work done in this area? Or you're just, some people just in depths of despair and depression. We really need to push out of that into the acceptance phase, and explore where we can make a difference. And once you start really looking into that, it can be small things, it can be big things, it can be a mixture of all of these things done by different people, and then we can start making progress. Next slide, please. Again, Stephen Covey, if you haven't come across this book, it is worth a read. I think the title's a bit cheesy, but The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I think it does, it's relevant for anyone really. And I think they've got a version for children, maybe not quite primary, but it is good. And one of the first habits is being proactive. And he talks a lot about your circle of influence and really focusing on what you can do. As I mentioned before, it can be quite overwhelming. You're not sure where to start. So look at what you can do, what you're already doing, perhaps, who you can speak to, and not get too absorbed by that circle of concern of the news and the weather, the economics, public transport, things you have no control over. And just really focus on your circle of influence. You'll see that this will then potentially grow. And also, if you see that eco-anxiety in your children, your staff or colleagues, sorry, maybe bring them and show them the circle of influence. Show them that actually they just need to focus on what they can do as an individual. And there is lots you can do, from what you consume or not consume, which includes media, the conversations you have, what you eat, what you buy and don't buy food-wise, etc. So yeah, lots. I just find that's very helpful, another circle sort of diagram to look at, and can be used in a teaching context. Next slide, please. Sorry, there's a few little bits here. So imagining a school as a ship, there are some things that we can control on that ship. We can scrub our decks to keep things clean. We can repair sails if they break. What we can't necessarily change is the wave heights, the tides. There are certain things we can't change. But looking at everything, all the elements that feed into your school, there are lots of support places out there, which Alison and Di have mentioned quite a few already. Anthony mentioned right at the beginning, we've got the Department of Education that has said we need every school to have a sustainability lead and for a climate action plan to be in place. not all schools have this, which is amazing. We're in my school that I'm a governor to, we're quite early on in our journey with all of this. So this is going to be a key strategy. Yes. Affiliate groups are looking at trusts. If you're part of a bigger group of schools, there might be some opportunities and collaboration there. Donors and alumni, maybe there are some out there that some funding you can get to get new litter picker sets or wellies or new trees to plant, etc. I've got here, we're in Brighton here, and so look at your council. Maybe your council has an arm that sort of climate net zero, however they call it. It might be different in your council. An arm that supports schools to transition to be more sustainable. So we've got Our City, Our World, who are doing a fabulous job supporting us all. We're also a Church of England aided school. So through the Diocese of Chichester, we've got some support through there. So maybe you might have some support there. Governors, again, ask them, is this work on their agenda? Are they looking at sustainability? They're a critical friend. They are there to support senior leadership in ensuring the school is doing what it should be. Then you've got your staff body. Are there inserts perhaps? And then you could ask your staff, your seniors, can we have some CPD or staff insights about this to scale up, because there is a lot here to learn. Maybe try and go to that conference to network and share that Anthony mentioned in Sheffield in next April. There's also the Festival of Education in July at Wellington College, which was really lovely, just to meet people. You've got a book there, The Leadership for Sustainability by David Dixon, which is a great book, and that's a good one just to have in your collection. Maybe one for the school that you can share. Your parent body as well, they might be able to help in some ways, whether that's time or skills, coming in to do some talks if they're working in this field. Lots of things to use. Maybe see if there are any parents you could tap into for support. There's also the Parent Teacher Association, PTA, so they could maybe support. And then, of course, your students. So it's lovely to see some of the photos of Alison, your students, and your I don't know what you call them, the eco change makers or the eco club ambassadors. It's lovely because they are so keen and receptive to learn more, and as was said, they need the knowledge, but also the skills. So that last little diagram in the top left is Climate Change and Sustainability Toolkit for Educators. So on this website, there are lots of curriculum mapping and resources that, so it's quite a good central space to get some ideas on how you could link certain bits of sustainability into any subject. So that's a good one. And of course, SEED, which was mentioned, is really good as well. I think, Anthony, you mentioned. Yeah, next slide, please. Thank you. I just thought it'd be interesting for you to see this as Our City, Our World. So the Brighton and Hove Council, Our City, Our World. We have this structure that they're supporting our schools with. It's a 2-year cyclical rolling program. And there are the 2 bars that run throughout. So it's really thinking about the curriculum. So greening the curriculum at every point. So every subject, but also in assemblies, all sorts of everywhere basically. And then right at the bottom, you've got your school operations. So looking at consumption and waste, food, biodiversity, travel, transport, energy, and water. Rather than doing them all at the same time, Our City, Our World suggests we do this 2-year rolling program, so you have a term to focus on each. There are lots of ways to do this. This is the way that we're going to be trialing, as you can see. So this time, we're doing consumption and waste. but also look at pensions, perhaps. Where is your pension coming from? You can, so that's maybe slightly school operations side. Look at Make My Money Matter. There are little things like that that could do make an impact. So next slide. So we're trying to race through here. Just some, I know someone sent a link with lots of books. There are so many books out there. Anthony mentioned I should talk about the book I did, which is on there, one of the 5. These are ones that I've used quite a lot. We've got La Légende du Colibri. I'm really sorry it's French, but if you can maybe use it in your French curriculum. I couldn't find the English version, but I thought I'd just add it here anyway, because it's such a beautiful story of a little hummingbird who is busy all the time, and everyone teases him for being busy all the time. And then there's a great fire in their rainforest. And he carries on working and humming around whilst all the other animals take refuge and just watch their rainforest burn. And they spot the little hummingbird grabbing little drops of water and dropping them onto the rainforest. And they laugh at him and say, look, you're not going to make any difference. It's just a waste of time. Until one bird with a bigger beak says, actually, I can maybe help out. I'll help out. And he takes some water and puts over the fire, and then there's a snowball effect, and all the animals end up trying to put the fire out. So it's a lovely little story. If you do find the English version, do let me know. That's a really, really good one. Then we've got the How to Say I Love You, which is a lockdown project I did with my father-in-law and a cousin. A story of a little cockerel who doesn't know how to say I love you. So he goes traveling around the world to see what other animals do to say I love you. And they're all real animals that live on our planet, our beautiful planet. So yes, it's just a celebration of our biodiversity and what you can do when you explore what others do. So there's that one. Very quickly, we've got The Tree and the River by Aaron Becker. There are no words on this one, which is fabulous. So the students can actually make up their own story. So that's very good. Then we've got the classic written in the 70s, The Lorax, which is obviously great with just fabulous words and obviously very relevant kind of fable, a classic fable. And then finally, for us particularly, this When We Went Wild is great because it's Isabella Tree's story of what they did. It's based on a true story of a dairy farm that were not doing very well near us in Brighton at the Knepp estate, and they decided to wild everything. So it's a lovely story about changing our ways. So yeah, just a little selection of books that I've used quite a bit when talking about sustainability. Next slide, thank you. And then what are we aiming for? What's our results? Next slide. Well, we're aiming for humanity to live in this safe and just space. We're looking at trying to nudge the next generation to be less ego-logical, but ecological, and to give them the knowledge and the tools and skills to do that. So as Gandhi said, Earth provides enough to satisfy every man's need, but not every man's greed. So yeah, showing the students that we can be happy with enough. We don't always need more. Next slide, please. So yeah, there are lots of benefits. Obviously, you could spend a whole day talking about benefits, but there are the educational impacts, sports literacy, you've got the environmental sustainability, reducing your ecological footprint, your whole school engagement. So you're not just engaging your students, but also other staff and parents and families. Increasing well-being and health. It has been shown to, when you're acting, when you're doing something to solve this sustainability issue, your mental well-being will increase. So talking about eco-anxiety, flipping it into eco-empathy, and doing something about it does help. Obviously improving air quality, etc. And there are just so many win-wins, cost savings potentially. And then if you are in a religious school, I've got this because we're a Church of England school, it does reflect stewardship, and care and compassion for the creation as core Christian values. So depending on religious, if there's a religious element, that can be weaved in as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. And there we go. So yeah, as Barack Obama said, we are the first generation to feel the impact of climate change and the last generation that can do something about it. I mean, if that doesn't get you going, I mean, we've just got to do this work, and aren't the opportunities and the win-wins everywhere? And that's what's really exciting with this work. So I hope there've been a few tips and views, perspectives in what I've just said now. And then last slide, please. Yeah, so one planet, one humanity, one you. What will you do? And good luck with it all. It's a really important journey. Everyone can play their part. And if you've got any questions, do contact me on LinkedIn. That'd be great. Thank you.
Josephine, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing again your passion and your enthusiasm. And as you said, your macro view. I think we've had two kind of macro views, the kind of curriculum macro view and the kind of more holistic macro view, and then the school perspective as well. Really, really interesting, as Alison's saying. So good to kind of link those three together. Always hard coming last, but you had the benefit of all the knowledge beforehand. So thank you for trying to draw those together as well. That's such a skill to do. So I really, really appreciate the time and thought and effort that you've put into that today. So colleagues, just before we finish, do keep on chatting in the chat. The links to the additional books alongside Josephine's book. Just sell us your book again, Josephine. Where can we get it? What's it called? Sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry. How to Say I Love You, and you can, unfortunately it's just on Amazon at the moment. It's self-published. Maybe one day it'll be published properly, but yeah, it's here, How to Say I Love You. There is a French version as well. You can see a little French theme perhaps, but yeah, the English version is online on Amazon. How to Say I Love You.
Amazing, thank you so much. And the other ones from our colleague Sophie Brack are on the screen as well there. So those are all the slides that we've got and the presentations that we've got. I did kind of promise you a Q&A with Di Swift at the end. What I propose to do is I will stay on the call, and if you want to listen to that, feel free to carry on listening. I will add that to the recording. Otherwise, I know many of you will need to disappear and head off home, head off to make tea and all those sorts of things. But huge thanks to all of our presenters today for the time and effort and engagement with us that you've put into those presentations. So I really do appreciate that. So stay on if you want to hear the rest of my Q&A with Di in terms of her piece of work. But there's plenty of links in the chat as well. But I appreciate that many of you will need to head off and go. But huge thanks. So hope to see you again at the GA conference. I hope to see you again elsewhere very, very soon. But I will carry on the recording as well for those of you staying. If I can just find that somewhere. Lost my thread a little bit. Pouring down where I am, I can see in the distance. Much needed rain for sure. There we go. Okay, so I will share the screen again for any of you still on the call.
So it's around is some of the innocent of, and equally carefully perhaps that we assess through thinking carefully about it.
Me of the ways that. Thank you, Di. A really rich walkthrough what is a very powerful document. I remember when I saw you present on that the first time, I was really taken by it. So it reminds me of the ways that I can bring that into my own work and my own teaching. I love the idea of sussing out sustainability, and that assessment point at the end is so important, because we get asked such a lot about how we think about assessment in foundation subjects in primary geography, and you talked about expansive assessment, the leaking out of knowledge into different areas. It's so wonderful. So such a lot for people to reflect on there. I just wonder, with the participants that you had, and it's a bullet point that you've got on your key findings on the website, I wonder what view they had, because you had 4 days with them, as you said, on this idea of the significance of the effortful nature of curriculum design as a very key professional capability, because that is counter to this marketplace of curriculum solutions that we sometimes get involved with in schools. I wonder if they had any reflection on how that impacted on their thinking about primary geography in the future, and maybe other foundation subjects as well.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. A great question, and a really important one to address. So I'm going to start with the evaluation day and we'll work backwards. So one of the teachers on the evaluation day said that they felt that they'd enjoyed teaching this sequence of learning far more because they'd created it. They were far more invested in it. And I think, as you rightly draw our attention to, you know, we're inundated with reports on teacher workload. And one of the ways of addressing teacher workload is to generate standardized curricula. And one of the things we addressed in the project is that that's actually full of dilemmas. So when we think about teacher workload, thinking about hours worked is actually a very blunt instrument. So curriculum design, curriculum making, lesson planning are all effortful. They all involve a lot of hours. But actually, those are essential hours in what it is to be a teacher. What's special about being a teacher? What's special about being a teacher is turning subject knowledge into pedagogical knowledge. And that's our craft. That's at the core of what we do. If you take that away from us, you're taking away the core of what we do. And as you'll see from the report, 4 teachers, 4 different school contexts, 4 different solutions, differently impactful, but all of them successfully impactful. Very different. So the CDC gave us a framework. The sustainability definition gave us a framework. Within those edges, we could then be free. If we'd followed a script, we wouldn't have been able to be as relational with our pupils. We wouldn't have been able to be as relational with each other. So you can see, can't you, the logic of teachers are busy. We need to take the pressures off teachers. Here's a slide deck. But actually what you're doing is taking away the professional craft of curriculum design and thinking about the reasoning and the dilemmas. So a lot of our debates were addressing those dilemmas, recognizing that there isn't an answer out there. There isn't a single solution. These are the edges. Let's be playful within the edges.
Thank you. And you work with teachers and senior leaders as well. So I suppose those senior leaders could take that and trickle that down within their settings as well. Did they have different views or different resistances to the teachers? Because sometimes teachers can think, oh, I can be a bit subversive because I'm just in my room and I can close my door. Did they have any particular views, those leaders?
Yeah, that again, a really interesting point. And this is again where the project was contextualized within a teacher education partnership. So we worked with the senior leaders first. because they were releasing their teachers for 4 days. So that was whilst we'd got a bit of funding, that was significant investment. And you're arguably taking those teachers away from the classes. So you need this to be valuable work. But one of the things that we talked about with the senior leaders was this wasn't a course where the teachers were going to go back with answers. This was a professional development opportunity that was going to make our heads hurt. And we wouldn't necessarily, we were researching. So it was really important that the senior leaders were cognizant of what the project was and what it wasn't. I think for me, to take it up big picture for a bit, there's a really important aspect to this work. Our work needs to be evidence informed. Where does that evidence come from? Unless we've got projects like this, where teachers are generating evidence that becomes part of that base, then a lot of our evidence is going to be based more on that tick list and that performative, rather than the evidence that actually teachers enjoy thinking, and they enjoy grappling, and teaching is messy and complex and can't be reduced to a slide deck that we can replicate in different contexts. So actually changing, well, I don't know if it was changing the mindset of senior leaders, but making sure that senior leaders were conscious of what the project was and what it isn't was very important.
Lovely. We'll leave it there. Teaching as productive struggle. That's my kind of key takeaway phrase as we start a new term. Thank you, Di, so very much. So if you made it to the end, really hope that was a really useful session for you all, and we will join you very, very soon. Thanks a lot.